So you've heard about this awesome game mode called Illuvium Gauntlet, and you want to master it as fast as possible. Well, my name is Paz and I'm here to help you just with that. Why trust me? I've had multiple rank 1 finishes on the Illuvium Gauntlet leaderboard live on stream, and I've also spent thousands of hours in Illuvium in general and in other auto battler games like TFT and Dota Underlords. First, what even is Illuvium Gauntlet? Think of it as a strategic survival game mode where you build teams of Illuvials, powerful creatures from the Illuvium universe, and fight your way through battles with other players who are trying to do the same. The fights play out automatically. That's why the game genre is called Auto Battler. But you are in charge of making all the strategic decisions for the match. Much like a football manager who oversees every aspect of the game, but doesn't take part in kicking the ball themselves. The goal? Survive as long as possible while optimizing your resources and team composition. But don't worry, you don't need to be an expert in auto battle games or in Illuvium to get started with Gauntlet. This game mode is completely free to play and you can use my sign up link in the description down below to get started today. Before we get into it, a quick heads up. Gauntlet is in constant development, with patches and hotfixes being deployed regularly to make the game even better. For example, we might see a Ranger being implemented in Gauntlet very soon. The Ranger will be very similar to the Iluvials. Also, the Augments might get reworked to fit closer to a system that we see in TFT with items. No matter how your Gauntlet game looks today, those strategies and tactics that I teach you today will still apply in future patches. Alright, let's start with the basics. At the beginning of each Gauntlet map, you will be selecting Illuvials from a shared unit pool. Those Illuvials will appear in your shop. Each Illuvial comes with its own class and affinity, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen once you deploy them on the battleboard. Think of it like assembling a powerful team of monsters, each with its unique abilities and synergies. You also have a set amount of resources, mastery points and health. Mastery points are similar to what gold is in other games. You spend it on summoning Illuvials and advancing to higher levels to play more Illuvials on your battleboard. Managing those resources effectively is key to surviving longer in Gauntlet or ultimately winning the whole lobby. You will be matched versus 7 players in a round-robin battle royale style. Each wave you will fight one of the 7 opponents randomly. These rounds are called PvP rounds, player versus player. But sometimes you will be matched versus PvE rounds, player versus environment. In these rounds, all players are matched versus computer-generated opponents, and you will get mastery points for beating them. These PvE rounds are very easy to beat, and they give you a moment to breathe and rethink your strategy. The rounds get progressively harder as you and your opponents get to higher levels with stronger Illuvials. Your strategy will evolve as you play, combining Illuvial affinities and classes to form powerful synergies. At the end of each wave, you'll receive more mastery points, which you can use to strengthen your existing Illuvials or add new ones to your team. You can also decide to do nothing and save your mastery points, which you can see right here. This will increase your income and strengthen your economy for future rounds. Now let's talk about strategy. It is best to focus on a strong, balanced composition at first, one that leverages early game units with powerful synergies. For example, you could start with a basic fighter composition. The other main compositions that come to mind are Scions and Rogues. But you shouldn't forget about the other 2 classes, which are Bulwarks and Empaths, and they are really strong for any late game composition. Let's quickly go over all the different 5 classes that we have in Illuvium. So Bulwarks are your beefy big tanks. They're here to soak up damage and protect your damage dealers and your supports. Usually they find a spot in every late game composition because you usually need tanks who actually take all the damage and keep your other units safe. Scions and Rogues are your glass cannons. They deal a lot of damage, but they cannot take a lot of damage. They're very squishy. Empaths support your team with heals, shields, stun, buffs and debuffs. They don't do much damage themselves, but they are crucial, especially in the late game when you have a solid foundation with damage dealers and tanks. And then lastly, we got the fighters that we talked about earlier, so they can do a decent amount of damage and they can take a decent amount of damage, making them kind of the middle ground between Bulwarks and the Scion and Rogues. For a beginner player, I would recommend to focus on rogues and fighters as your damage dealers. They can even come both onto the battlefield because those traits really support and enhance each other. There are many different ways how you can use your Illuvials. In this round, for example, I tried something new. My rogues and fighters are my damage dealers, but instead of bulwarks, I use empaths as my tanks. In Illuvium, team compositions are not only built from these classes, but also from affinities. These affinities, water, earth, fire, nature, and air, determine the elemental strength and weaknesses. If you manage to get them online, they're again gonna be increasing your team's power level. In addition to that, if you manage to counter the enemy affinities with your affinities, your units will be going hyperactive, which means they are getting very much stronger. You can see how the affinities counter each other here on the screen right now. By the way, this and all the other infographics that we talk about in this guide, you will also be able to find in the description down below. Now let's dive a little bit deeper in how Illuvials evolve. Each Illuvial has 3 stages. You can see the stages as kind of evolutions. To evolve an Illuvial from stage 1 to stage 2, you need 3 copies of the stage 1 Illuvial. Then, to evolve it into stage 3, you need 3 copies of the stage 2 Illuvial, or you could also say 9 times a copy of the stage 1 version of the Illuvial. However, it can be very hard to find 9 copies of the same Illuvial. In most games, Illuvials will stay at stage 2 unless you get very lucky with the shop rerolls. But if you do find a lot of copies of a particular Illuvial, you should definitely go for it, because stage 3 Illuvials are extremely powerful. You can also decide to really push for a specific stage 3 Illuvial, finding those 9 copies, because maybe this stage 3 Illuvial is key to your composition, by refreshing your shop, which is also called Rerolling. This gives you 5 fresh Illuvials to choose from in your shop, but this can be very risky. Rerolling costs mastery points, 2 per reroll. And it will hurt your economy a lot if you don't hit your stage 3 Illuvial and just roll away your whole economy in the process. So balance is key. Sometimes it's better to just play the cards that you're dealt instead of trying to hard force a composition. You gotta know when to hold them, when to fold them. You know how it goes. One thing to remember in Gauntlet is that all these Illuvials come from a shared unit pool. You can see right now on screen how many copies per Illuvial are in the specific tiers. The tiers are basically how much mastery points it costs and how strong the Illuvials are. We have a tier 0 costs nothing, is usually the weakest Illuvial, and it goes up tier 1, 2, 3 all the way to tier 5, which costs 5 mastery points per Illuvial. If a lot of players are going for the same Illuvial, it will become harder to find it. So if everybody is trying to go for a popular Illuvial, for example Rota, it's gonna be very tough for you to find 9 copies of it to get to stage 3, or even 3 copies to get to stage 2. Sometimes the most popular strategy might not be the best, because it's so highly contested that it's gonna be so hard for you to find these copies. In this case, it might be a good option to actually deviate from your original game plan and try to make another composition work that is not so highly sought after. In a future patch, we will have scouting, so you can actually check out the enemy boards, the enemy benches, and you will see what the enemy goes for and which Illuvial he has already on his bench ready to go. As your Illuvials evolve to stage 2 and stage 3, something exciting happens. Their basic affinities and classes become composite affinities and classes. These composite synergies combine 2 basic synergies to form a more powerful one, giving you even more ways how to build a good composition. So for example, let's take our Rota from earlier. Rota is an air plus rogue Illuvial. When Rota evolves to stage 2, when you get 3 copies of it, it becomes a Revo. Once it becomes a Revo, it gains the dust affinity instead of air, and it keeps the rogue class. And at stage 3, Revo evolves into a Gyro. Rogue evolves into Slayer. So a Gyro is a Dust Slayer Illuvial. But a stage 3 Gyro doesn't only provide Dust and Slayer to your team, it also still provides the basic synergies from the Rota that it started off, Rogue and Air. Meaning a stage 2 Illuvial usually has 3 synergies that it provides to your team, and a stage 3 Illuvial has 4 synergies it provides to the team. The 2 basic ones and the 2 composite ones. The more of these basic and advanced synergies that you can combine on your battle board, the stronger your team will be. For example, playing multiple rogues will help you reach higher rogue thresholds. The higher of a trade's threshold you reach, the stronger will be the buff to the rogues and also to your full team. You can check them out when you hover over the synergy. Or you could play a Quinx. A Quinx is also a dust Illuvial, and once you hit the 2 composite synergy threshold, you will be activating that synergy. This might sound a little bit complex at first, but just think of it like connecting dots. The more synergies you activate, the stronger your team becomes. Let's talk about one of the most important things in the game, which are augments. You will get random augments at certain milestones. These augments boost your Illuvials damage, survivability, or provide supportive effects. They're a key part of what makes each gauntlet run unique. For example, we could take a defensive augment to buff up our tank even more to make him even more sturdy. Or you might want to take a high damage augment, put it on your main carry, your main damage dealer, and make him go crazy with even more damage output through this augment. You can put a maximum of 2 augments on each Illuvial. And you should try to focus on your most important units, so that being your biggest tank or your best performing damage dealer. I got a little tip for you right here. You can check the damage dealt graph on the left side of the screen to identify the damage type of your Illuvials. A red bar stands for physical damage. A blue bar stands for energy damage. So if your unit does energy damage, you want to give it augments that enhance that energy damage, like for example Omega Power. A white bar means true damage, and this means it ignores all resistances, but this is something for a future guide. Talking about the future guides, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you like the content and if you want to see more of it in the future. Alright, let's get to the hardest but arguably the most important aspect of any auto battler game, which is resource management. Now, before each wave, you will have a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to make strategic decisions on how to spend your mastery points, your gold. You can either buy more Illuvials, you can re-roll the shop to find other Illuvials, you can level up to place more Illuvials on the board, or you can decide to do nothing at all and keep saving up mastery points to get more interest. Which brings us to the key mechanic in mastery point management. This is a key mechanic also in real life, and it is as old as humanity itself: compounded interest. The more you save early on, the more you will have later on. So sometimes getting out 1 more interest point, 1 more mastery point early on will accumulate up to 5-10 mastery points in the late game. So basically, for every 10 mastery points that you don't spend, that you save, you will get 1 interest, and that goes up to 7 interest for 70 mastery points saved. Usually it's really hard to save 70 mastery points to get to that maximum interest level, but you usually want to stay at least above 30 mastery points to have a decent income and to not screw up your economy. And also similar like in real life, if you have no money in your bank account, it's going to be hard to stack up money in there, but if you already have a decent stack, it's easier to accumulate more. Sometimes there will be situations where you just have to bring the strongest board you can to the next fight, which means you have to roll down all your gold or spend all your gold in leveling up. But in most cases, you want to keep some money in the bank to keep accumulating interest and to keep your economy healthy. Which brings us to the next point: how to accumulate mastery points, win and lose streaks. This just means the more games you win in a row, the more mastery points you will get every round. Similar to that, the more games you lose in a row, the more mastery points you also get for keeping that lose streak up. So this ties in with what we talked about earlier. If you are on a win streak and you want to keep that win streak going, it's sometimes a good option to re-roll, to use all your mastery points to strengthen your board to win the next round. You're gonna lose some interest by using your mastery points to strengthen your team, but by keeping that win streak alive, you're gonna get that win streak money every round, and this is gonna make up for it. And then on the other side, we got a lose streak. If you are on a lose streak, you wanna stay on that lose streak for a decent amount of time to accumulate a lot of mastery points. The problem here is when you are on a lose streak, you're trading away another resource, which is health. And what makes lose streaking so hard to pull off is to find the right moment to stabilize and not lose any more health, which I usually do around 40-50 health. So for beginners, I would definitely recommend to try to aim for the win streak or be somewhere in the middle where you have a healthy health pool but also a decent economy, but you don't have to necessarily go on a win or lose streak every game. This is just the ideal scenario, how you can maximize your income. So we talked a little bit about health, but let's make it really clear. Health is a resource. Sometimes you don't want to use your mastery points and you're willing to give up health, losing rounds instead of it. You want to keep your economy strong and you don't mind losing a bit of health. Sometimes you're low on health, so you want to invest your economy to save the health points and not lose too early and make it to the top 4. A very important thing to know is when to level up. Avoid leveling up in the first few rounds unless you play aggressively for a win streak. Focus on building your economy until you have gathered enough mastery points to make strategic upgrades. You should usually level up if you will stay within 30 mastery points, preserving a decent economy. If you are significantly lower in health points than most of the players in the lobby, it's usually a good idea to level up as well, to keep up with the power curve. You should never lose with mastery points left in your bank. So make sure to not miss the final push for level 8 or level 9 at the very late stages of the match. If you can reach level 9, that is a good indicator that you will most likely finish in the top 4. I would highly recommend to assign hotkeys to rerolling, buying XP to level up, and selling Illuvials. A common mistake that I see a lot of beginners make is that they have too many mastery points sitting dead on their bench with Illuvials they want to go for. In most cases, it will be better to focus on a strong economy first instead of finding that perfect stage 2, stage 3 Illuvial. After all, it doesn't help you if you find that Adoredo for 15 mastery points if you don't have the economy to level up and actually play it. Let's talk a little bit more about finding Illuvials and re-rolling for them. When looking for Illuvials, remember this: the lower your level, the higher the chances of finding low-cost Illuvials. The higher your level, the better are the chances of finding high-tier, high-cost Illuvials. So every time you level up, this graph, these percentages of finding specific tiers of Illuvials will change. For example, at the very early stages of the game, level 3, level 4, you have a 0% chance of finding tier 5 Illuvials, the strongest Illuvials in the game. But at level 7, for example, you're gonna have a 0% chance of finding tier 0 Illuvials. So keep that in mind, level up accordingly to increase your chances of finding the units that you're looking for and that you need. A little example here, you want to go for a Scion combination, and a Scion combination needs usually at least one Fleesh. The Fleesh is a very good unit, even though it's tier 0 and it doesn't cost anything. So make sure to get that Fleesh early on because you're gonna have less and less chances the higher level gets. When you are pushing for a specific stage 3 Illuvial, you want to find those 9 copies of it. You want to make sure to also look for other Illuvials, because if you're rolling down just to find one specific Illuvial, this will mostly go sideways. But if you're looking for 2, 3, 4 different Illuvials that you could play around that you would like to have stage 3, then you usually will succeed in at least 1 or 2 of them, and then the other ones you can discard, making the reroll strategy way more successful. And the last little quick tip about all of this is you can hover over this symbol right here to see what Link's evolution will be available this game, and also to see what tier 0 units are available. This will change every round. Something that I almost forgot to mention, which could cause a lot of confusion, especially for beginners, is all the different Gauntlet game modes and how to actually start a game. So Overworld right here, you don't want to click on this. This is, well, you might want to click on it, but only if you want to go into our creature collection game, the open world Overworld. So if you want to play Gauntlet, you're going to click on Illuvium Arena right here. And we have a bunch of different game modes in here, and maybe this interface changes, but what won't change is that Leviathan means you're gonna bring your own Illuvials that you have collected in the open world or that you have bought on the marketplace. So that means that those Illuvials that you bring into Leviathan will have their own stats and their own levels, therefore they're gonna have their own power level. If you play anything else than Leviathan, for example rank, casual, or whatever it might be, it's gonna have standardized stats, standardized levels, and everybody in there is gonna have the exact same chances, so it's gonna be completely free to play. This UI here might change, but what won't change is probably that we have a tutorial, which I can obviously very much recommend. Also, survival is very good for beginners to Illuvium to learn the auto battler side of things. And then we also have Ascendant, which is our 1 versus 1 mode. Let's get to positioning strategies right now, which is arguably as important as resource management. So by the time you reach later stages, all players will have high levels and plenty of Illuvials on the board. This is when positioning becomes absolutely crucial. Just like a well-coordinated army, where you place your Illuvials can make all the difference. As a very basic example here, you wouldn't put your archers in the front line where they're just gonna get annihilated by the enemy knights. You would want to put your knights at first, then the archers, maybe then some siege engines, and maybe at the very back you want to put some more knights because there could be rogues coming into your backline killing your archers. So in Illuvium, you want to have your bulwarks, your tanks in the front line, soaking up the damage. You want to have your supports and your damage dealers behind the front line to be safe behind them. And then lastly, you want to also put at least one tank in your backline if you're facing against rogues. So as we mentioned earlier, rogues at the beginning of the fight will always jump into the enemy backline. Which means when you are against rogues, you don't want them to assassinate your empaths and your scions, and you want to put a big tank into the backline to catch those rogues. Because if those rogues are able to jump in your backline and assassinate your damage dealers, your supports, your empaths, your squishy units, this will most likely result in a loss. Hello! I hope you're enjoying the content so far. If you want to support my content creation, if you want to say a little thank you, whatever it is, there is a way to do it completely free. All you have to do is go into your Illuvium account profile settings. There is a tab called Referral Code. And if you put my referral code in there, it's not going to cost you anything. It's not going to take away anything from you. Illuvium is going to give me a cut. And even if you have another favorite Illuvium content creator, just make sure to put their code in there and always have a creator code in there to actually help our fellow content creators. My code is PASS, and make sure to re-put it every 30 days at least. You can do it every 20 days, every 15 days, but every month this code will disappear and you will have to put it in again. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. I recommend for beginners to make up your mind about a composition, about a strategy that you want to play before the game starts, and then once you jump in, you have all of this confusion out of your mind. You know exactly what you're going for, and you can just focus on other things. Usually, if there is not like 6 out of 8 players going for the same composition, you should be fine of getting at least all those units to stage 2 and be able to play them for the top 4. But once you get better in Gauntlet and more experienced, you're gonna be able to adapt mid-game and also in the early game. So for example, if you see, oh, there's a bunch of Felicias available this game and also an Arcane Lynx, which is also Scion, maybe this is a Scion angle and I'm gonna go for that. But then you might think to yourself, hey, if this is such an obvious angle right here, maybe a lot of other players go for it, and I should actually go for the composition that counters the Scions. And there's a lot of things you can do and decide during the game. Adapting is key to the success in Illuvium. So once you get more experience in the game and something like mastery point management is just happening automatically, you don't even have to think about it anymore, then you can maybe focus more on something like pivoting away from your strategy and adapting to what cards you're dealt and also to what the enemies are playing. So basically, flexibility is key in Gauntlet once you have mastered the basics. And once you are at that stage when you can play around with what you dealt with and what you see in the lobby and so on, this is where it gets really fun, and you can even find new compositions that you didn't think about before. So in conclusion, your goal is to survive as long as possible and outlast your opponents, with the ultimate goal of being the last player standing. But even if you don't make it to the final wave, don't worry. In Gauntlet, top 4 is considered a win, because top 4 will gain you rating points and the bottom 4 will lose rating points. So what are you waiting for? It's time to jump into the Illuvium Gauntlet and test your strategy and see how far you can go. Whether you are a beginner or a seasoned player, Gauntlet offers endless replayability and an exciting challenge every time. Hop on in and give it a shot. I'll see you in the arena.